sector, where you have about 10, this is conceptual still, so it's not very specific, but, almost a quarter of our vehicles, are alternative or electronic sources, so we would have to shift that to at least 50. And so that's the order of magnitude that we're looking for when it comes to essentially decarbonizing our community.
Before you change the slide.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the graph, and it's not really a graph. It talks about 5% to probably what's about 1% of energy intensity of GDP. And I'm asking, for those of us who are older,
Yeah.
can we see in future information kind of a graph that reflects not just 36 years, but maybe 5, 10, 15,
Yeah.
20, 25.
Right.
Because to me, looking at 2050, for my kids, that's one thing, but
Right.
for me, it means very little.
Right, yes, that's a very good point. So it's hard to imagine where that big jump is going to come, right? And how incremental, what's the speed of ramping up, right? That's a very good point, and that's something that we're trying to think about right now. What is the scale of implementation that we can expect? What's the rate of uptake when it comes to implementing these programs? And so a lot of that has to come around, it's user behavior, it's technology, it's doing a lot of policy shifts as well. So there's a lot to consider in terms of how aggressive that curve is going to look.
You kind of get a self-selected group of advocates that show up for these events. What's been your response from the general public in Santa Monica when you're trying to sell this program and trying to get people en masse to change it?
Yeah, so, the general population of Santa Monica is fairly what we call environmentally literate. They get the issues, they get the terminology. There are definitely segments of the population where I think we could do a better job of reaching out to. People in our lower income neighborhoods, people of color, people who don't speak English as a first language, our elder generation, our younger generation. There's lots of segments where we need to start thinking about doing really targeted approach to just broach the conversation and get people involved in being able to do something. But on the whole, when we presented this to our city council last week, all of them had something positive to say. All of them are very well versed in the issues. So we don't have to do what other communities have to do, is to continue to convince their council, to convince their community that climate change is an issue, that we should be spending some of our resources towards it, setting goals for it. We don't have to make that fight, right? Where it's a matter of how and when. So as we're continuing to do some of these plans, I just want to put a little plug in. We're putting together a community climate summit, and this hopefully we'll get to your point is, how do we bring the community into actively planning and feeling like they're part of this process? What parts of a community climate action plan would they feel like they can take ownership of? How can this plan be a resource for them? And how can we all feel excited about something like this when it's really long range, it's really kind of high level thinking, and it's hard to get people activated around these stretch goals, right? So this is happening on October 29th. I'd like to invite all of you and anyone else who would be interested in coming. And we hope it to be an activity where we can have a lot of thoughtful conversation, with planners, with our partner agencies, and just with our neighbors, to really think about what do these massive shifts in our built environment, in our transportation sector, and in our lifestyles, what does that mean? Okay, so we're going to kind of start coming down in levels here, and just from the state level, there are some stretch goals for the state when it comes to electric vehicles. We're looking at trying to get 15% of our vehicle sales to be zero emission. Right now we're at 5. We're trying to get from 200,000 to 1.5 million electric vehicles in California in less than 10 years. So that's, if you think about the rate of change that has to happen in 10 years, we're talking about, at least a twofold factor every year. And that's similarly what we're looking at here locally on the west side. Right now, EV and battery plug-in electrics, the adoption is somewhere in the low 2000s. And within the next 4 to 6 years, we're probably going to scale that up 10 to 20 times. So that's a pretty steep curve. That's starting to look a little exponential. And I think one way I'm thinking about it is that it's starting to look like a bell curve, right? We had the early adopters here, right? And then as it's ramping up, we're starting to hit the middle of that bell curve, where the general public and the general, the late adopters are going to be more mainstream, and we're going to see this become much more mainstream. And that's the challenge that city is trying to come up against is, how do we provide services and resources for these people to make that decision? So in Santa Monica, this is some information that we have as of December 2015. These are registered vehicles in Santa Monica. And you can see that where we have a lot of more dense electric vehicle registrations are obviously in our single-family neighborhoods. And I think for obvious reasons, those people are able to make those decisions. They're able to accommodate the EVs. And it's in these neighborhoods where we see a lot more people kind of taking that half measure by getting the hybrid, getting the plug-in hybrids. And that's basically for lack of the ability to charge.
That would be a great visual in a Santa Monica Mirror story about what you're doing, where it's happening. Okay?
Yeah, we can share this information with them.
He was saying about how you communicate.
Mm-hmm. So I think, for me, in my work, this really emphasizes the fact that we need to focus on the multifamily neighborhoods. We need to focus on people who are probably a lower income spectrum, people who don't necessarily have the financial resources to look at that premium when it comes to looking at an electric vehicle and looking at that added cost when it comes to installing their own EV charger, because that's a big burden, and to ask someone to spend somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to get their own EV charger, upgrade the building, run the conduit, that's a pretty tall order to expect that kind of adoption.
I read that one of the problems in apartment complexes is you don't want to run a wire out your door to plug your vehicle in an open area, and a lot of them don't have their own controlled garage space. So how do you address that kind of issue?
That was the question before us. I won't say that we have the answers, but that's something that we are trying to address. It's a little hard to read, but this is where we are currently, our purple are our existing stations. We do have a slew of new installations in terms of EV charging stations. Some are in the mid-city area, some are along the beach areas down here. These are the Nielsen lots. This is parking structures 9 and 10. This is the main library. These are lots 7 and 8 off of Wilshire. So we are still continuing to push out EVs, EV charging stations, but even for the city, it takes a long time to do it, and it takes a lot of staff resources to get these things done, because the siting, the permitting, we still run into the same issues of bringing out power to places that didn't have power before. So even in an open parking lot, it's still quite challenging.
What are the differences? There's a purple and a yellow or whatever. What are the differences in those two?
Purple refers to what's existing, and yellow refers to what is pending. So within the next year, hopefully, these will be coming online. I know the Nielsen ones are physically installed, they just have yet to be energized. And so that's an issue, just between our building and safety department and Edison, we'll be getting it done. I will also point out that we have some of these red bands here in the city, in the middle of the city, And what we're looking at is doing either curbside chargers or doing charging through our streetlights. So we want to see if we can look at our LED streetlights, look at the excess power that we freed up by converting them to LED, and then converting one of those streetlights to a streetlight or an EV charger. So that's something that we'd be piloting in the next year or two. Okay, sorry, it's hard to read. So what we're trying to do here is we want to put together an action plan, because we've been kind of going about this roughshod over the past few years and haven't really had a strong idea of how much, where, how are we going to fund it, what issues are we trying to address. And so the idea of putting together a plan, it helps bring together all the various departments in the city. It helps our partner organizations, and it helps our advocates kind of get an understanding of what we're trying to work towards, and making sure that we're held accountable to a plan like this, and that we're working towards those goals and staying consistent. So this is something that we're developing right now. We've called out a few priorities here, and I'll touch on a few of them today, but you can look forward to seeing this plan kind of getting released early in the next year. If you have any questions about what we just read here, I won't read all of them for you, but.
One of the things that I was looking at in terms of permits by the city would be, a lot of people go through the city for parking permits. Do you give them a break when they purchase a parking permit if they have that kind of a vehicle? They said pay the same rates.
For residential parking permits, they're still gonna pay the same rates.
Is there a plan to change that? As an example, in your parking structures, perhaps you could make it free for electronic vehicles and increase the prices, or eliminate the $1.50 subsidies that you're providing in those to discourage people without electronic vehicles from coming and taking up the space. To encourage them to use public transportation, let's
Right.
put it that way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of mechanisms that we can utilize. I think focusing on the residents is really what we're going to try and do, and providing as much infrastructure and as much incentives for the residents is going to be important. The challenge will be, as you can see, if our percentage of vehicles that are going to be EV, if we're going to go from 2% to 5% to 15%, we're still not really taking cars off the road. And the challenge will be, can we still provide free parking or discounted parking when there's still the same number of cars on the road, and now they're all gonna be parking on the curb for free, right? So that's the balance that we're gonna have to strike. I think where the incentives might come is more just providing a service at a discounted rate, the service of charging. Because we're not gonna be able to sustain charging 10,000 vehicles in Santa Monica without starting to charge people. But if our residents are going to be charging, and they're gonna be charging at night, I think we could probably give you guys a break in that way.
One of the things with the city of Los Angeles and a lot of the building subsidies that they were given got used up. And then there are none later on. And so the concept of encouraging people to do it, and then at some point running out of funds to do that is unfair. What I'm proposing is that if you remove some of the costs associated with it and give them credit for complying with being energy efficient, that's something that could go on and on and on and on, and wouldn't necessarily be a program that would be cut off unless overall the city's looking for funding, not just specific designated funding.
Yeah. So, anything like this is on the table. We're still kind of in the ideating phase, and we're still exploring, what works. And we want to be open to innovation and open to kind of re-looking at the way we do these processes and making sure if they're right, if they're equitable, if they're sustainable. Sustainable just as in maintaining them as well. So, absolutely.
I was just curious, I don't know if you've explored this that much, but what's your kind of plan for tackling multifamily? I feel like that's a big challenge.
Yes. we'll talk about that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I just kind of want to go over some of what's already out there on the table, that's not coming from the city. You know, I'm sure a lot of you know already that you can get a tax credit for purchasing an EV. That's available to you. The Air Resources Board has a rebate for you. If you're low income, you get a $1,500 premium on that rebate. Bureau of Automotive Repair will similarly give you $1,000 to retire your old vehicle, particularly if it's contributing a lot of smog, if it's very inefficient. You get a premium for that. South Coast Air Quality Management District has a similar program. Unfortunately, that's on hold right now because I think that was pretty popular. But these are things that are happening at the regional level, at the state level, and they're resources that are available. So we want to make sure that people know about them. If you guys want, I'll send you guys the presentation. You don't have to take notes. So I know it's a lot to cover, but a few more. So even in LADWP, there are resources for installing EVSE equipment. LADWP will give you $500. It doesn't cover the cost of installation, so it's probably going to be the cost of your charger or the cost of the meter. If you want to get a time of use meter, they'll give you a discount per kilowatt hour, and then you're going to receive a $250 bonus. You get $4,000 if you at least do 3 spaces, and then you can get an additional rebate for every 10 spaces after that first 3, for a maximum of 20 rebates per property. So that's what's going on in LADWP. Southern California Edison, if some of you are aware or are now, Charge Ready is their new program, and what they want to do is they want to fund, install, and operate all the electrical infrastructure required to get you to charge your vehicle. The property owner is going to be responsible for procuring the charging equipment and then operating it. But Edison's going to own all the stuff in the back end. And so their idea is that this is going to be a turnkey operation. You're not going to have to deal with contracting, permitting, getting all that work done. Edison's going to do it for you. The unfortunate thing about the program, though, is just the fact that they have this 10 space minimum, which is a challenge for people who might have only 10 spaces, right?
Yeah.
So how do you even think about these, our duplexes, our triplexes, and our small multifamily neighborhoods who don't have that space to give up, right? But they're trying, it's a pilot right now. They're trying to get economies of scale. They're trying to do things efficiently. So if they're going to do all that work to upgrade your electrical panel, to run the conduit, and do the trenching, they want to make sure that they're going to get a decent amount of charges in the ground. So from the city perspective, we're trying to do this in some of our downtown structures, because that's where we have a lot of parking right now. We were hoping to do some of this mid-city and some of our street side parking where it's head in, but some of our other departments had a little bit of heartburn when we talked about 10 spaces. So, okay, there are other ways you could finance this project. You don't have to pay out of pocket. Is anyone familiar with PACE? Some? Okay. So PACE is a financing mechanism, and you're basically leveraging your property tax. You can install energy projects like solar, you do energy efficiency, you can get your energy storage system, you can upgrade your air conditioning, you can do installation, you can do water projects, you can do drought-tolerant landscaping, you can do, you can install a rain harvesting system, and you can also do seismic upgrades. And you can package all these projects and get them done at zero money down. And then what happens is that the payment that you are obligated to pay will then show up on your next property tax bill. And that payment will stay with that property, even if you decide to move. So the beauty of that is that you're kind of adding value to the property while literally adding value on the property. And so that's just one way you can also finance installing an electric vehicle charger without having to pay upfront costs. Do you have any questions about that? Okay. So in Santa Monica, yes,
How many people, how much money is being allocated to that right now?
right. So the beauty about PACE is that it taps into the private lending market, because what PACE providers are doing is that they operate across the whole state, and they're starting to operate across the country. And what they do is they say, like, I've got 1,000 home projects, and 1,000 of those projects adds up to $10 million of loans. Now, and then they go start to sell those loans to these larger institutions that will say that's a pretty attractive package, and they invest in it. So this is all private lending, but because you're taking a new line item on your property tax bill, the cities and the counties have to get involved in order to be able to levy that assessment. And so, yeah, so the Federal Housing Authority also just recently got involved, and they, before they were taking issue with the fact that whether or not this was going to take priority over their mortgages, but they've since allowed for that, as long as people aren't delinquent on payments, those people can be authorized to be a part of PACE as well.
That's my question, but I understand it's a statewide program, and very difficult to break it down into individual use for the city of Santa Monica.
So you're talking about smaller projects, like what's actually happening here? So in Santa Monica, we've seen a moderate amount of uptake. Before we only had one PACE provider, they're called Hero. And in Santa Monica, we had about 30 projects implemented, and this is energy efficiency, it's solar, it's also water. We don't get to see all the details of the projects, but those are what's happening right now. And earlier this year, we just authorized all the remaining PACE providers in California, so we now have 7. And the way that this works is that it comes through your contractor. So if you got Joe Contractor and you have a project, well, Joe Contractor can go contact Hero and say, I want to provide my customers PACE. I want to be able to give them a zero money down project, and then work with you guys to levy that PACE assessment, because it'll help them bring more business, right? So anyone can get involved in PACE, but it's largely contractor implemented and financed by the larger financial institutions. There's one more funding opportunity, which is not as well known as well. This is the Capital Access Program, and basically what it is, it's for small businesses, and a multifamily property can be a small business, an apartment could be a business. But what it does, it provides a loan for design, development, and purchase of EVSE. Just have to make sure that these aren't just your private charging stations, they have to be accessible to other people. But what CalCap does is that they're going to contribute 20% to this loan loss reserve, and then once you've shown that you've paid off your loan, or you've gone 2 years without being delinquent, a portion of that will come back to you in the form of a rebate. So that's another way of kind of helping people provide another option. So back to some of the priorities that we talked about. One of the things that's really top of mind for us is we need to modernize what we already have out in the field. We've got a lot of legacy chargers. They are basically fancy outlets. You just plug in and it just goes. We don't know how many people are using it. We don't know how much power it's using. We don't know whether or not, we don't have no ability to control them. And so we're kind of operating in the blind here. And newer chargers, what they're able to do is they're able to essentially be a part of a network. We're able to look at them from a dashboard perspective. We'll be able to look at utilization across the city. We'll be able to implement cost recovery, and we'll be able to have multiple schedules of fees depending on whether it's in the middle of the day, whether it's in the middle of the night, whether you're a resident, whether it's a city vehicle. And we want to be able to influence user behavior so that way we can ensure that there's enough turnover at each station, because we know people like to hang out sometimes, and it goes beyond their charging time. So that's what we're trying to move towards. We want to make sure that's also functional for the users as well, because you guys are going to be able to look and look on your smartphone and be like, oh, there's a charger over here, it's available, here's the rate, I'm going to go check it out or reserve it, things like that. So that's what we're looking for, and that's going to help us establish the standard to move forward with all these other projects when we're continuing to expand the network. So we talked about multifamily a little bit, and this is where we're going to kind of get into it a little bit. Obviously, there are lots of challenges when it comes to multifamily. Every project is custom. There's no one size fits all. You know, you have so many different decision makers involved, and all the building types are very different, from where the electrical meters are to where parking spots are, to how old the building is, whether or not you need to do a massive electrical upgrade or not, where the meters are in relationship to the parking spaces. And then there's these kind of political, social issues of like, well, my spot's deeded to me, you know, and I don't want to give up my parking spot so we can have, you know, an open charging lit spot, right? Or how do you provide charging to one space and not the other spaces? So there's lots of issues in there. And then there's also just kind of an equity piece, you know, how can we make it accessible to people who might not be able to afford it but want to do it? And then obviously there's the split incentive issues, right? And particularly in rent-controlled Santa Monica, it's very hard for someone to feel like they should spend money to give someone an amenity if they can't get any cost back on it, right? So how do we get involved? Is the city, you know, what's the city's role in getting involved and really kind of sussing out those issues? So I've pulled out a lot of challenges and questions, and I haven't provided many answers, and that's intentional. But one way we think, you know, we're going to be able to provide some relief is to really try and expand the public access and do it on the street and do it through our existing infrastructure, particularly through our streetlights. Again, we have a lot of streetlights in the city. We're converting them to LEDs. It's going to free up some power to be able to charge basically in your neighborhood. And so this is already being done in LA. They have a handful in downtown and some of the other areas. And we'd like to pilot that as well. So before the end of the year, we're going to be retrofitting about 1,200 streetlights right now. And we'll try and kind of identify where are the streetlights, where they're located next to a metered spot that we can regulate for some time, that we can regularly enforce with our police. And you know, see what works. There are different models out there that are starting to come out, and you know, this could be just kind of slapped on to a street light, which is not the most attractive thing in my mind. Or you can have something that's a lot more integrated and sleek. So that's just what we're thinking about. So these are kind of the questions that I'm posing in terms of kind of how do we address these issues when it comes to not only multifamily, but what about the businesses that are in leased properties, you know, that are occupying tenant spaces. They don't, you know, they want to do the right thing, but maybe the property owner doesn't really care to, right? So can the business that's occupying the property get involved? And so, you know, some of the questions that we're trying to solve are, you know, should the city be incentivizing electrical upgrades on private property? That's what the utilities are doing right now. That's what the regional agencies are doing right now. But it's not really helping out our small to medium-sized properties. Should the city perhaps get involved in operating those charging equipment? You know, property owners don't necessarily want another thing to administer, right? It's another operating cost for them. It's you know, it's another contractual relationship that they have to have. It's either that or the driver themselves has to get involved, and they would have to put themselves out to say, you know, I want my charger. I'm going to work with ChargePoint, and I'm going to have this relationship, and I'm going to charge myself. But they're still going to have to set that up, right? All on their own. So that's a pretty steep ask for getting each individual driver to charge themselves and do that. The challenge with curbside charging though is the fact that, power's not always available at the curb, right? That's not what they're built for. We're just trying to take advantage of what's already there. But what if, there's a business or a multi-family property and the electrical panel's right there and they have excess capacity? Should we be able to run conduit underneath the sidewalk and energize the curb right outside? That's another consideration. Should the city instead perhaps look at partnering with businesses and other property owners to put in an electrical meter in their property, so that way we can have that run out to the sidewalk? That's gonna get a little bit touchy, because we have city property on private property, and that's kind of a messy thing to deal with. But maybe residents wanna band together, and they say like, well, we wanna sponsor our own charger, and we just wanna put it right here, and we'll have a community kind of shared access. Should we have some opportunity for the neighborhood associations to say, we've identified the spot, we've surveyed all the residents, they feel like this is gonna be the best place? Does that make the most sense? Then I have one more last question here. Oh yeah, should EV charging be dedicated in the residential permit parking? So right now, we're mostly looking at metered spaces because that's allows for turnover, it allows for regular enforcement for parking division. But what about the residential permit areas where people are actually living, right? I know in some neighborhoods there's less parking than others, and if we start to dedicate some of the space on the street just for charging, is that going to create a hostile environment? How do we ensure that there's adequate turnover? How do we ensure that people who, if the charge right in front of the property doesn't become their de facto parking spot, right? So these are things that we're starting to wade into, and maybe we're going to bite more than we can chew, but that's what we're looking to do. There's other options like this. This is a product from a company called Envision. There is I believe this is I want to say it's 6 kilowatts of solar in there. There is a battery system right here, this little bench, and the EV charging station is right there. And this is a steel pad, and the whole thing is mobile. You can put it on a trailer, and you can drop it down in a parking spot. It's meant to fit perfectly within one parking spot. And you can put 1 or 2 chargers on there. You can have a bench for people to sit down. You can put a USB charger for people to charge their phone. It costs anywhere between $60,000 to $90,000, so it's kind of pricey. But if you're looking at this system more than just an EV charger, we're talking about essentially like earthquake preparedness, right? If we have a lot of EVs in the field and the electrical grid goes down, we're not going to be able to charge anymore, right? So maybe being able to charge remotely is better. This brings a little bit more value also in the fact that getting EV charging infrastructure installed is very timely, it's very costly, right? There's a lot of considerations to think about. Ones that we touched on, just to get the stuff in the ground. All those chargers that we talked about, the pending installations, they're taking about 1.5 to 2 years to get installed, from concept to completion. So if we can turn around and buy these in less than half a year, it might provide a little bit more value, and it will provide us an opportunity also to go around the neighborhoods, go around the cities and say like, if I put a charger here, how much utilization is it going to get? And I move it over there to the other neighborhood, and then I find out that there's more or less utilization over there. We can use it in much more, a lot of different functions.
Are you guys primarily still looking at like level 2 charging, or are you doing fast charging?
Yeah, so from the city, so the question was DC fast charging or level 2 charging. I'm of the mindset that level 2 is probably what the city needs to be doing. DC fast charging is just kind of like a nice to have amenity. And if you think about the demographics of not only the people who live here, but the people who visit Santa Monica, no one's really coming to Santa Monica for less than half an hour. You don't come across the 10, you don't drive up PCH just to pass through Santa Monica and, go on your merry way. Like, you're gonna stay here. We want you to stay here too. But I don't think it's really the city's role to get people from 0 to 100% in half an hour. We're gonna do our job to get you from 50 to 75%, 25 to 50, from 75 to 100. But I don't believe it's necessarily our role to provide this as a service. I think that's something that the private sector is probably wanting to do. Obviously with Tesla, Nissan, BMW. But I know, we're not in a corridor per se. People aren't passing through and trying to get to somewhere else. We're a destination. So in terms of the next steps, some of these things that we talked about, there are things that are kind of happening in tandem. But just broadly speaking, we want to start off with retrofitting our existing chargers and continue to expand what we have planned already. That will allow us to establish a cost recovery schedule, and that will allow us to actually start to have some budget. And that's the challenge with the city, is that we haven't really dedicated funds to saying that we're committed to having an EV program, that we should have an EV administrator, that we should be providing EV rebates to people. We don't have any revenue to do that right now. And so this will allow us that opportunity to start to have some programs and resources that we can give back to the community. Like I said, we're going to look at looking at the streetlight charging pilot, as well as looking at mobile charging through systems like that Envision system. And in the meanwhile, we'll be developing this kind of short-term action plan, looking at 2 to 5 years, what really makes sense to help bring that curve up to where it needs to be for EV adoption. It's a little bit complicated. It's more complicated than the last one. But anyhow, this is that map again. Thank you guys for sitting through it. I know it's pretty heady stuff, but we hope to engage other people around these kinds of plans and activities and see if we can really get other people's feedback for doing this kind of work. So we want to make sure that it makes sense and we're doing it right at the right time, and we're addressing those challenges that we think are out there, but making sure that they are the right ones. So thank you.